role-play fans in Japan have discovered that Bowser, that long-time bad guy, really does suck. And I mean that in a good way.
The Mario & Luigi series has been a franchise that I've been playing for most of my life now, with all the games being really fun and engaging RPGs. And after the great success of Superstar Saga, Alpha Dream went on to the Nintendo DS with Partners in Time, and despite it being a bit more flawed with its level design, I still think this is a really fun RPG. But with two pretty good games under Alpha Dream's belt, there's only one thing else to go but up. As 4 years after Partners in Time release, we would get another entry of the series during the midpoint of the Nintendo DS's life. But this time, this entry is going to be taking a much more interesting twist to the gameplay. As Mario and Luigi are still the main characters in this game, but this time, the story will be focusing a lot more on Bowser this time around. As while the Koopa King will be traveling across the Mushroom Kingdom, the brothers will be traveling within Bowser's body. Which, honestly on paper, sounds like a really dumb concept, but in execution, this is considered one of the most acclaimed Mario RPG games ever made. And it's also a game I have a lot of nostalgic memories for. When I was very young, I first ever heard about this game when I was looking through this place called the Nintendo Channel site. Which, for those who don't know, it was a software on the Wii that allows you to see the latest Nintendo news and see trailers for upcoming games, and one of them was Mario & Luigi Bowser's Inside Story. Which was also the very first time I ever heard about the Mario & Luigi series. And seeing that trailer really got me intrigued on what this game is all about, and eventually on my birthday, my cousin sent me a little letter saying I will be getting the game when it comes out. I'll be honest, I was a bit more confused on what they meant by that, but then a few months later when it finally did came out, my cousins went by my house and gave me the game. I went through that game completely blind, and honestly, that game really blew me away. And so for this video, I'm going to be focusing specifically on the Nintendo DS version, but I'm going to talk about the 3DS version later on in this video. Because, oh boy, that game is, that's something to talk about. But with everything out of the way, let's get started. Okay, so starting the game up, we have that ever so iconic title screen that I still adore to this very day. As the shot of Peach's castle and Bowser's castle being reflected just feels this very whimsical vibe that I really adore. But as for the story, it begins in the ever so peaceful area of Toad Town, as it focuses a bit on this small little Toad kid who returns home to his mother. He tries to greet his father as well until suddenly, so what that was the beginning of a crisis, which is known as the Blue Orbs, which causes the Toads to turn into basically giant boulders. With the cause of this being a mysterious figure arriving at the Mushroom Kingdom giving these Toads a special mushroom. And because of this, Peach holds an important conference within her castle to figure out what to do with this situation, with Mario and Luigi being the ones who attended. As well as Starlo, a small little star creature who is the representative of the Star Spirits. However, Bowser eventually arrives to try and kidnap Peach, where Mario was able to defeat him with ease with the help of Peach, who was able to weaken Bowser, and then flings him in the air like he was nothing. After that humiliating battle, Bowser finds himself very deep inside of the woods, where after searching around, he eventually finds this mysterious cloaked person who says he's won a prize, which is something called the Lucky Shroom, and if Bowser eats it, he would have the ability to defeat Mario. And so Bowser immediately claims the mushroom as his, and once he eats it, it immediately causes a reaction within his body, which causes him to turn into a giant vacuum cleaner, as he literally inhales everything in his path like he's freaking Kirby. And this is when it's revealed that the mysterious cloak figure is indeed Fawful, making his grand return from Superstar Saga. And he was the one that caused this whole outbreak to cause the Mushroom Kingdom into shambles. And so with this brand new ability for Bowser, he immediately goes back to Peach's castle.
Suck! Suck! Suck!
However, after consuming everyone, he then passes out. And so with everyone gone, this is Fawful's opportunity to take over Peach's castle. But as for the Mario Brothers, they have been shrunken down and became deep inside of the turtle's belly, where he was able to find both Luigi and Starlo, with the latter being the guide throughout their adventure. But eventually, Mario and Luigi find themselves in a small little corridor area, where they mess around with Bowser's nurse, which causes him to wake up, with Starlo trying to speak to Bowser within his stomach, with the giant turtle being confused about a mysterious being within his body. with Starlo calling herself Chippy to keep a low profile while talking to Bowser. But as for his whereabouts, it turns out when he was knocked out cold in Peach's castle, Fawful took him and landed him within the caves, as he's completely weakened and cannot even breathe fire. But eventually, as he finds his way out, he then encounters Fawful once again, where he reveals his master plan, as he is here to try and conquer the kingdom, and not only he has taken over Peach's castle, but just now he's taken over Bowser's own castle, with Bowser's minions being in big trouble. And so it's now up to Mario, Luigi, Bowser to stop Fawful and try to save the kingdom. The story in this game is honestly pretty strong for the most part. I really love how all the trio this time around has the same goal, but they aren't necessarily working together per se. Like obviously Mario and Luigi want to stop Fawful from taking over the kingdom, but Bowser wants to stop Fawful because he stole off his minions. As by the time Bowser arrives back at his castle, all of his minions have been brainwashed by Fawful, and the few ones that haven't have been caged up. That, and Bowser just really hates Fawful. But speaking of which, just like in Superstar Saga, he's still a very charming villain. I really like how he kind of speaks in this broken English kind of way. Kind of like if his dialogue went through a very shoddy translation. And I also like how you can feel he has a sense of narcissism, as he's literally plastered his face across the entire kingdom. But he's not alone during this world domination, because now he has his own minion with Midbus, who is basically Bowser's big rival throughout his own adventure. As while he traverses through the Mushroom Kingdom, he'll meet a lot of these weird characters along the way. Like this weird sentient block creature called Brock Messier, who's this little block creature that's Bowser's salesman. I really love his design, like how he's able to take off his head and flip it upside down to make a really evil looking face. He also has this hilariously aggressive block dog as well. But besides those, there's even these trio of minions for Bowser that helps him along the way, but they more so just tick Bowser off, as while Bowser was dealing with this annoying Wiggler, he overheard them making fun of him behind his back. Which honestly did give me a good chuckle. I gotta say, I really love what they did with Bowser in this game. With the last two Mario and Luigi games, Bowser didn't necessarily have a big presence. I mean, hell, in Partners in Time, he barely appeared in the game. But now since this game is full front center with him being the main protagonist, you get to see a lot more of Bowser's much more goofy personality. I really love how much he has a short temper in this game. There's this one section where he's near a statue that states it's a replica of the legendary powerful hero, that he tries to reflect it on himself until he realizes that the statue is ugly. But as for the Mario Brothers, they're about as charming as the other games in the series. Luigi is still definitely the highlight as the comic relief character, and honestly I really adore Starlo as well, because she plays off at Luigi very well in this game. I don't necessarily get the hate for the character, as from what I've seen, people don't really like her that much, mostly because she bashes Luigi a lot. And while she does make a joke here and there, she doesn't necessarily bash him too much, and even when she's a lot more aggressive towards him, it's mostly deserved, as there were a couple of times where Luigi just straight up chickened out from this adventure. But I think the best thing that they included in this game is that Mario and Luigi talks a lot in this adventure, and not necessarily talk like they speak outright dialogue, but every time they try to communicate with each other or someone else, they talk in this very Italian gibberish way that's honestly very charming. You could tell Charles had fun recording this.
E tutte le cottorate ton simpatichete. E tutto armatato. E pocon se ta cottora poter con apposto che sadora parcrato. Potono tunita na tunna na senatona canara na senana.
Alrighty, so jumping all the way to gameplay. So just like the previous Mario and Luigi games, the brothers this time around pretty much controls exactly the same. With the brothers, you explore different parts of the area while having special abilities, which are all returning ones from past games, like Luigi being able to squish Mario to go through narrow areas, or Mario and Luigi doing this special spin jump to go through larger gaps. But what makes this game much more different compared to the other ones is that since we're exploring Bowser's body in this game, it's now presented in a 2D side-scrolling way, while outside of Bowser in the Mushroom Kingdom is presented in a 3D way, which is a really cool contrast. And they really went all out trying to make every part of Bowser's body interesting to explore, with the primary areas in this game having a unique gimmick from one another. Like for example, there's this area called the water pump, where every time Bowser tries to drink as much water as he can, the whole area will fill up into this underwater section. And later on in this game, Bowser will be in this small little facility with a special X-ray machine that'll cause certain objects to appear within his body. But then we have certain areas which are used for certain minigames. as throughout Bowser's adventure, Mario and Luigi will aid him in certain areas, like in Dimble Woods when Bowser needs to pull out a giant carrot. Mario and Luigi will then go into Bowser's arms to try and enhance his strength. Or later on in the game, Bowser needs to help these multi-moles drill a hole inside of Toad Town, with Mario and Luigi going down his pelvis to try and enhance his strength. These minigames may not be very mind-blowing, but they're pretty cute, I'll just say. But as for Bowser, he plays drastically differently compared to Mario and Luigi. For one, unlike the brothers where they only have one button each to command, Bowser this time around has 2 buttons to command, where instead of having the ability to jump or use a hammer, the Koopa King will instead have the ability to punch certain objects, or use his fire breath to burn certain wood. But later on in the game, Bowser will be able to unlock even more abilities, like doing a special slide punch, that not only gives Bowser a short burst of speed, but also similar to something like Donkey Kong Country or Crash Bandicoot, Bowser can have a little bit of hang time, which does lead to interesting platforming challenges. Honestly, exploring as Bowser in this game is very fun. I really adore, like, every time you walk, he has, like, this very heavy presence around him, especially with those very loud footsteps. Doubly so if you compare it to the brothers, who are a bit more agile since they're able to jump and such. Especially when we head to the... Okay, so for the battle system for Mario & Luigi Bowser's Inside Story. For the brothers, it's basically identical with the previous games, as you use jump and hammers to attack enemies to get experience points and such. The battle system in this game is still very fun. It's very fun to try and counterattack these enemies, but this time around the brothers have a brand new item with them called the badges. And how these work is that in the battles, there's a small little gauge where every time you do a small little action command, the thing will slowly build up. And when it does, you can do a bunch of small things, like give you a bit more health or bro points. But if you want to be a bit more offensive, you can have a special badge to make you a lot stronger. This is honestly a really cool addition, and adds a bit more strategy to the battles, as you're encouraged to try to do your best when it comes to attacking, especially with the brand new special items. Now, with the previous Mario & Luigi games, I was a bit more critical with the bro attacks in those games, because with the problem with Superstar Saga is that you have very powerful bro attacks, but it requires very little bro points to use them, meaning that they're pretty much abusable. Meaning that you'll get experience points very fast, and by the time I got to Bowletta, I was able to kill her in 1 turn. And in Partners in Time, they introduced these bro items, but the problem is that they made it resource-based. But jumping all the way to Mario & Luigi Bowser's Inside Story, I feel like this is when they perfected the bro attacks. As throughout the game, you'll find these special puzzle pieces, and when you complete them, you get a special new bro move. How you get them is a bit weird, because sometimes they just outright hand you all of them, and other times they just hand you in big chunks. But regardless, this is a massive improvement, mostly because it has a really nice natural progression how you get these items. As you start off with the much more weaker ones, like the green shell that requires you to have 3 bro points, but then jumping all the way to the end as you have the most powerful items in the game, that requires you to have about 20 bro points. That way it makes it feel like you need to choose the attacks much more wisely. And the attacks themselves are pretty cool little spectacles. I always adore these and watch Mario and Luigi do these weird little attack antics. Like Luigi wearing this weird spring hat for Mario to jump on to land on the enemies. Or this one as Mario throws this giant beach ball against the enemies with Luigi on top of it. But the weirdest one I can think of in this game has the snack basket. As with this one, Luigi needs to eat as much snacks as he can, where he suddenly grows ginormously fat and Mario needs to throw up in the air and he slams down. Like, how do you come up with something like that? And then there's Bowser. Just like in the overworld, Bowser plays a bit more differently compared to the brothers, as instead of jumping on the enemies or using hammers and such, Bowser this time will punch the enemies or use his fire breath, with the punch being very useful against one enemy, while the fire breath is very good for multiple enemies. But as for Bowser's special moves, so unlike Mario and Luigi where they're able to find their special moves via these puzzle pieces, in Bowser's case, throughout his adventure, he'll find his minions trapped in cages, and when he releases them, he's able to use them as his special attacks. And unlike the brothers where they use the buttons for their special attacks, Bowser focuses on the touchscreen. Like when he uses Goomba Storms, you need to tap the Goombas so he can breathe fire so he can do a powerful attack. Although I've got to say when I was young, I freaking hated some of these moves. With the Goombas cases, that I feel like they move way too fast. But as for the other ones, I do like the Shy Guy Squad as you launch Bowser out of a slingshot, or the Koopa Corps where you're basically playing as Pong as you need to deflect the Koopa shells. And Broccoli Bunker is probably my favorite one because it's the most powerful one in the game, and also I just find it visually humorous of Bowser just washing a dog. Like, there's this literally life or death situation for the entire kingdom, and Bowser is just scrubbing his dog. But how you unlock this guy is very different from Bowser's other minions, as throughout the kingdom you'll have these special enemies that have a creature with them called the Blitties. There's about 15 of them and they're spread across the Mushroom Kingdom. And once you collect all of them, Frenchie will give you his dog as a reward. But how you collect the Blitties is another story, as in order to do so, you need to use Bowser's final main move for the battles. As since he ate the vacuum shroom, Bowser now has the ability to inhale certain enemies. And when he does so, Mario and Luigi is able to fight them inside of Bowser's stomach. And when we head to the boss fights, they're pretty top notch, as all of them literally have a really good difficulty curve to them. And I especially love the ones you're fighting specifically within Bowser, because some of these can be a bit very weird looking. Like, I never thought of Mario and Luigi fighting a robotic Mario and Luigi. With the only gripe I could think of is that I kinda wish Bowser had one more boss to fight with. Because right after the second Mid-Biss boss fight, you don't get a regular Bowser boss fight until you get to the third Mid-Biss boss in the game, which is at the near end of this game. That is because throughout the game, Bowser will have his own special boss fights, as a couple of times, a giant thing will attack Bowser and put him in the brink of death. Where after doing a small little minigame with Mario and Luigi, Bowser will go insanely giant. Which I have to admit, when I was a kid, I always thought this was literally the coolest moment ever. Like, come on, you're playing as a freaking giant punching your own castle. That is freaking cool. With the only critique I can think of for these sections is that they are surprisingly very easy. Like, there's not necessarily a strategy of doing a lot of these bosses. I mean, hell, even your level status doesn't have a really effect during these things either. But it does give you a good chunk of EXP. So even though these boss fights are pretty easy, at the very least it does give you good rewards, and it's very cool to look at, but I feel like Dream Team did the giant battles a bit better. Alright, so jumping back to the story for a bit. So after Bowser returns back to his castle, he realized that Fawful has taken control of his army and turned his own castle into a theater, where after defeating Mid-Biss, Fawful has taken Bowser into a small little dining area to feast on. Bowser gets very excited about this because he hasn't eaten all day, but as soon as he gets full, a bunch of booze shows up where they start just straight up force feeding a bunch of stuff, to the point where Bowser became overly obese, which causes him to fall into the floor, with the Mario Brothers just straight up ignoring him for the time being so they can search for Peach, which they eventually do so in the Flab Zone, where the princess explains a lot more about Fawful's motivation. As it turns out, is that Fawful's true goal in this game is trying to reawaken the Dark Star, where years ago, archaeologists discovered this weird entity that causes the entire kingdom into chaos. It could have destroyed the entire world until the Star Sprites comes in where they seal the evil entity, as the Dark Star goes into slumber deep inside of the Mushroom Kingdom, with the only one being able to reawaken it is Peach. And just in the nick of time too, because Fawful has arrived next to Bowser, where it's revealed that he purposely put chemicals within the food, that way he can fatten up Bowser super fast. You know, considering that and he turned all the Toads into balloons and he said he purposely made Bowser vor Peach, I feel like Fawful might be the type of person that have like a personal DeviantArt account, if you know what I mean. But despite him barely hiding the fact what makes him tick, it still worked for the most part because Bowser is very vulnerable, meaning that Fawful was able to shoot a laser at him, which allows Fawful to kidnap Peach by taking her out of Bowser's body. And so now that the mad scientist has the princess, he then gives Bowser a treadmill, which allows him to lose all that weight, but in the process he accidentally blows himself up into the caves. Where after searching around, he eventually finds himself underneath Toad Town, where the security system electrocutes him unconscious. And thanks to this, Mario and Luigi are able to access this small little area full of warp pipes. And now they're able to exit outside of Bowser's body. But as soon as they head back to the surface, they realize that the blorb situation is getting a lot worse. And not just that, but also since Fawful is still in the core of the Dark Star, he was able to put up this giant security measure to prevent anyone to head into Peach's castle. And after traveling across of Toad Town, they eventually find themselves with Dr. Toadley, a very special doctor that could figure out the solution to all of this. With the answer being is that Mario and Luigi needs to travel across the kingdom to figure out where to find the Star Cures, which are these artifacts where if you collect all three of them, it may be the help to break the barriers, and not just that, but also cure the Toads with the blorbs. And this leads to the second half of Bowser's Inside Story. So now that Mario and Luigi are outside of Bowser's body, they can travel the Mushroom Kingdom to places that you couldn't before, with the primary example being the main mission you go through within Dimble Woods, where you need to collect all these attack pieces here to unlock a special move to get the final star here. Which leads to a funny small plot where Mario gets captured by these small little creatures, and when Luigi tries to chase afterwards, he finds himself being inside of a dead corpse. Luigi's just running on a dead body. And the funniest part too is like the other creatures doesn't realize that the guy's dead. But as for other things, you could try and to complete some criterias within the game, like trying to collect every single beans again. Oh yes, beans are back, and they work drastically different compared to the past two games. With the first game, they're pretty much collectibles as you use them to convert it into coffee. But in the second game, they're pretty much used as currency for Fawful's little shop. But in Bowser's Inside Story, I think they figure out a way to work them the best, because instead of them being currency or used for a special item, this time around they're used as a special stat boost, that way you can have a bit more strategy on how much you want to upgrade the characters. And this new mechanic works extremely well for an RPG, because there's an even greater purpose of collecting these beans as they are used to make you even stronger. And you can even test these out on some optional side missions, with the most well-known one being is that if you travel back to Bowser's castle, you can find a small little freezer area, and once you punch a code, you can go deeper inside. And what's locked up within these areas are none other than the shrooms, which honestly blew my mind when I was a kid because I played through Partners in Time as well, and when I saw the shrooms again, it actually caught me by surprise. They're not necessarily challenging in a way, but it's a really cool callback to the previous game. I also like how they somewhat call back to with the events in Partners in Time where they were able to fight them as babies, with Starlo doing the one actual insult she did to Luigi in this game, where she jokingly states that baby Luigi fought them with his baby tears. Although ironically that was kind of the case within the game. But props to Mario for actually backing Luigi in this scene, because even though I don't really agree with the fact that Starlo only insults Luigi, I will say that she did go a bit too far with that joke. Because come on, look how sad she made Luigi. Look at him. So now with the presentation of this game, I've always said in the past that Mario and Luigi games look really good graphically, but Bowser's Inside Story took that graphical style and topped it up full time. This is easily one of the best looking DS games ever made. Scratch that, this is one of the best looking sprite-based Mario games ever made, as I really love how all the characters look in this game. With the previous games, the characters looked pretty good, but there was always like something off about one of them occasionally. Like in Superstar Saga, Bowser looked a bit off, and in Partners in Time, Mario and Luigi looked a bit off, especially with Luigi, I don't know why. But now in Bowser's Inside Story, every single character in this game looks really good. Especially with Bowser, I really love how he looks in this game and how expressive he is. This front face of Bowser really speaks volumes to me. And this can be applied to literally every single character in this game, like all of them look excellent. Fawful looks great, Peach looks great, Star looks great, everyone in this game looks great, as they all have this really nice and round aesthetic to them. Doubly so with the environments as well. Everything looks very bright and colorful as you expect, which is a really cool contrast between the much more abstract look within Bowser's body. Which I've gotta say is probably a big achievement from Alpha Dream, because it's not going to be easy to make environments look appealing if it's based on someone's insides. So the fact that Alpha Dream was able to achieve this is very impressive. And another thing they were able to achieve in this game is the soundtrack, because, well, I've gotta say, Mario and Luigi Bowser's Inside Story has to be one of my favorite Mario RPG soundtracks of all time, period. Yoko Shimomura never misses, and this game is no exception, as her style really does capture the much more bouncy aesthetic with Mario and Luigi. Especially when you compare it to the same soundtrack with the 3DS remake, where it's still good, but it doesn't really hit the mark. Alright, the Nintendo 3DS remake, this is gonna be a doozy. So in early 2018, Nintendo announced in a Nintendo Direct a full-on remake of Mario & Luigi Bowser's Inside Story. In between some big announcements like the Splatoon 2 Octo expansion, Crash Bandicoot coming to Nintendo Switch, and Super Smash Bros. Ultimate. And when I first ever saw this during that Direct, I was just mostly confused. And then I got pissed off when they announced Luigi's Mansion on 3DS. Like, this remake got announced a year after the Nintendo Switch released. And the game itself wouldn't get released until nearly 2 years when the Switch is in the market. Because hey, if Shantae did it years ago, why not Mario and Luigi? And to add insult to injury, when the remake released on Nintendo 3DS, it was around the time when Nintendo released New Super Mario Bros. U Deluxe. And the final result is a remake that became one of the worst selling Mario games of all time, period. As it released on a platform that most people moved on from, and regardless on how stagnated New Super Mario Bros. U was, people would just generally prefer to play a Mario platformer than a RPG. So Nintendo's marketing was mostly pushed on New Super Mario Bros. U. With the only big attention the Bowser's Inside Story remake got when it first released, was a one-off video someone made about an amiibo being shoved right up Bowser's f***ing ass. But that's just sales-wise. Is the game itself any good as a remake? Well, I actually picked up the remake and played it earlier this year before Mario and Luigi Brothership got announced, and honestly, if you don't own the DS version and just have the 3DS version, I'd say Bowser's Inside Story on 3DS is a decent version of the game. But I feel like fundamentally, the Nintendo DS version is still the best way to play the game. And it's way cheaper too. I mostly bought it just to complete my Mario and Luigi collection. But the reason why I can't say the 3DS version is the best one, because there's just these little snags here and here that just adds up. In the original DS version, the game runs at a smooth 60 FPS, but jumping all the way to Nintendo 3DS, it is now locked at 30 FPS. Now, I'm not really that picky when it comes to frame rate and such, like I've played a lot of Switch ports over the years. But the problem is that the pacing for the 3DS version is just much slower than the original. Doubly so if you compare it to the Superstar Saga remake, which runs at 60 FPS, and generally just has a much more faster pace to it. And while we're comparing the two remakes, when Alpha Dream released Superstar Saga on Nintendo 3DS, the quality and life improvements they added to this game was a significant improvement from the original GBA because we are jumping 2 consoles ahead. As not only they were able to streamline the overall in this game to make the flow a lot more faster and more fun, they also made battles in that game a lot more challenging, which was my main criticism with Superstar Saga, is that it was way too easy, as they were able to implement the much more modern structure of the Mario and Luigi games. But jumping all the way up to the Bowser's Inside Story remake, the improvements that they try to do in this version isn't as significant as what they did in Superstar Saga. That is because with Superstar Saga, that was the first ever game in the series, so there was going to be a lot of growing pains. But for the original version of Bowser's Inside Story, this was when they basically perfected the Mario and Luigi gameplay, so the new stuff that they added in this version isn't really that impressive. Doubly so with the new art style for Bowser's Inside Story. I was a fan of the 3DS remakes because I always adored the Dream Team art style more than the Superstar Saga one, but not as much as the Bowser's Inside Story one, especially with Bowser's sprite in this game. I feel like this worked better in Dream Team and Paper Jam because he was the main villain, but in this game, since they lean a lot more to his more comedic side, I just feel like this sprite doesn't really work as well. Because look at him, he's so chunky. I think the only thing I feel like the remake does in terms of better art style is probably the environments. Because wow, some of these shading effects for the environments look really good. Especially when you travel inside of Bowser, because it really does have a different feel from the DS version. As I feel like with the new graphics, it really emphasized the fact that you're traveling inside of someone's stomach. And also huge props to the upgraded giant battle scenes, as now instead of being just 2D sprites, they are now fully 3D animated. And all of this was thanks to Arzes, who made one of the most underrated 3DS games. And as for the brand new soundtrack for Bowser's Inside Story remake, honestly the new remixes here sound really good. At first I wasn't really too big on some of the remakes, like I prefer the original DS version of Cavi Cape, but the more I played a while ago, the more the music grew on me, to the point where I could say that I'd say they're on equal grounds. With some soundtracks I prefer on the DS, while others I prefer on the 3DS. With the only one that actually disappointed me is probably the new tile theme music, because unlike the other ones, the new tile theme is not a remix, but a completely new song. And honestly, it's not really as good. And yes, as you can see, there is another side mode to this game, similar to the Superstar Saga remake. This time around, focusing a lot more on Bowser Jr. as a character. I'll be completely honest, I have not played much of this mode, mostly because the same complaints I have for Bowser's minions with the last remake, it's the exact same thing with Bowser Jr.'s journey, because man, I really hate this battle system. I would rather play Sticker Star's battle system more than this. And because of this, I mostly looked up the cutscenes on YouTube, and honestly, the story here is pretty solid. I just wish it wasn't attached to this mediocre side mode. But at the very least, it's a completely optional side game, so it really doesn't affect the Bowser's Inside Story remake too much. With the only truly big flaw for this remake is that it's on a 3DS. This remake really should have been on the Nintendo Switch, because I feel like people would love to see a game like this in HD. And also, you can already play your freaking DS games on 3DS. What was the point of this remake? Superstar Saga made sense because you couldn't play a GBA game on the 3DS, but Bowser's Inside Story, you could. But no, Alpha Dream stick to the guns and released this on the dying console. And because of the massive flop as well as a lot of debt that was just adding up over the years, I recommend watching this video. Alpha Dream then eventually filed up for bankruptcy. And we wouldn't see anything Mario and Luigi related for about 5 years after this. But I feel like the good thing that came out of all of this is that it was pretty much a wake-up call for Nintendo. The 3DS had a really good run, but it's time to move on to bigger things. Alrighty, so after getting depressed after that section, I feel like it's time to wrap up the adventure. So as soon as Mario and Luigi was able to collect all 3 of the Star Cures, Dr. Totally was able to convert them all into the Miracle Cure. And so all the Blorbs have converted back to normal. But most importantly, Mario and Luigi can go back to Peach's castle finally. And boy, they're in for a real treat because Fawful really did a number at Peach's castle. With giant dangerous robots everywhere with statues that have Fawful's face all over it, it really does give Fawful a much more sinister tone. But as soon as the brothers was able to take out the trash bot, Bowser then arrives at Peach's castle in a safe. Earlier in the game when Bowser was trying to get one of the Star Cures, his own minions betray him by locking him up in the safe, which really did a number on his bag, and so after Mario and Luigi was able to mend it, Bowser learns one final move, which is the roll. And so he was able to head straight into Peach's castle, where after he was able to go through various guards in this big old maze, Bowser was finally able to find Fawful, and after defeating Minbis one last time where he literally dies, the Dark Star has finally awakened, and so Fawful then absorbs half the Dark Star's energy and turns into this weird dark form, where Bowser straight up punches him and laughs that he was finally be able to got him. But then suddenly, the Dark Star then moves and goes straight into Bowser's stomach, with the Mario Brothers chasing afterwards. After going deeper and deeper inside the belly of the beast, they realize the Dark Star is planning something, as throughout the areas he's been chewing down on Bowser's DNA, which allows him to copy his moves, and when they were finally to corner him, he then dissolves back into the surface, as he's completely converted into Dark Bowser, an evil entity that looks like Bowser, which is also a character that honestly probably brought up some interesting fan art. Like, this came out during the 2000s, and one of the biggest trends around that time was having an eviler version of a character. But anywho, so as soon as Dark Bowser was able to get to the surface area, he then heads forth to find Fawful, who has taken half of his power. And so Bowser needs to find Fawful quickly before this evil entity completes his powers, which he was luckily able to do so in the exact same location this whole game started. And so the final battle pursues for Fawful, who is a very challenging villain, as he has so much tricks up his sleeves thanks to the Dark Star's energy. But as soon as Bowser was able to get the final punch in, Fawful then gets reduced into a small little spider that runs off, with Dark Bowser finally being able to catch up to him and absorbs Fawful inside of him. And now Dark Bowser is finally complete, which means there is only one thing left to do. As soon as Dark Bowser was able to go all the way up to Peach's castle, he then unleashes his main power, which is a big windstorm to pretty much wipe out everything, with Starlo then chipping in for one final talk with Bowser, who states that he's not going to be alone during this final battle, with Mario Luigi then chipping in, with Bowser being confused on why he's hearing the brothers. But as for Dark Bowser, he states that everything's going to go into darkness and he'll be wiped out. But all Bowser does is scoff at his little statement, as he states that he will defeat him and the Mushroom Kingdom will be his to conquer.
Showtime.
And so the final battle pursues, and my god, this is probably the most epic final battle in any Mario game ever. as the tone, the music, and everything is just perfect here. I freaking love the grand finale. It is honestly one of my favorite final battle musics. And the best part too is that this is only phase 1 of this battle. As soon as Bowser was able to get Dark Bowser in low health, he then coughs out Fawful that Bowser was able to inhale. And so we then head inside of Bowser's stomach for the Mario Brothers to fight Fawful for one final time. And man, Fawful looks really freaky here, as he's no longer a being creature, he's this giant evil entity that the Mario Brothers would soon be able to defeat in such an ironic way for Fawful. With Superstar Saga, Cacklado was Fawful's former boss that the Mario Brothers was able to defeat inside of Bowser's body. And now jumping all the way to Bowser's Inside story, Fawful is having the same fate of being defeated inside of Bowser's body, which is a really cool way to conclude an iconic Mario villain like Fawful. And now with Fawful defeated, it's time for Bowser to do the final blow. And so, with that final blow, the Dark Star has finally been defeated, with this destructive windstorm being lifted. And now with Fawful and Dark Star defeated, Bowser finally has the opportunity to kidnap Peach, much to Starlow's dismay. But then suddenly, Fawful then appears again, being only ahead this time, where he states that Fawful is completely done as he quits being a villain, and states that he will disappear forever. But of course, he has one final trick up his sleeve and explodes right in front of Mario and Luigi. But instead of the explosion killing them, it instead releases everyone outside of Bowser's body. With the Koopa King then realizes that this entire time everything that's been happening to him has been Mario and Luigi's doing. Which obviously sets Bowser up in flames as he wants to fight Mario and Luigi because he feels very violated. And of course, the brothers ended up on top with Bowser getting his ass kicked all the way back to his castle. Yep, things are definitely back to normal in that one. And that concludes Mario and Luigi Bowser's Inside Story. This is honestly still one of the best Mario RPG games ever made. Like, I'm not kidding, this game is freaking phenomenal. It refines on what makes the past Mario and Luigi games great and put it into near perfection. And how they implement Bowser in this game is really good too. I really adore how much he plays very differently, but similar at the same time. And the slapstick humor that the series is known for is still here and accounted. If you're very curious on the Mario and Luigi games, I highly recommend trying out Bowser's Inside Story, as it's definitely one of my favorite Mario games of all time. And I think Alpha Dream knew about this because about 4 years after Bowser's Inside Story released, we would get a full-on sequel to this game with Mario and Luigi Dream Team. So the next time we'll be here, we'll be jumping straight into Mario and Luigi's first ever 3DS game. But they'll do for today, so thank you for watching and I'll see you later. Bye bye!